Lewis Jackson is saying that he has some groundbreaking research about Ripple and XRP that could mean the future if XRP is going to be adopted or not. It really depends on this one specific thing. So let's play the clip and I will tell you what I believe and what is going on here. Here is Lewis.
Research. I've discovered that XRP needs to be categorized as this one thing in order for it to run the new financial system. If we get this classification wrong, it could mean XRP's role in this new financial system ends right here. Banks are settling in bank-issued money. And that's a problem for XRP because if this wholesale system, the private chain financial system decide, oh, we're just going to settle with bank money, then XRP is pushed out. And if XRP gets pushed out of this private world and it has to now operate within the public world, what does that mean? Well, to me, that means, well, XRP is basically just like XLM at that point.
Oh, snap. Wow. Okay. All right. XLM fans, how you feeling about that? That was, didn't know we were going there. All right, let's continue.
Operating in the public sphere, person to person, it's not doing anything like it was supposed to. The XRP is supposed to be this, I hate to say it, but the banker's coin, it's supposed to integrate into that system. But if it's not in that system, it's just XLM. And so if XRP ends up being treated like XLM, what's the point? Like, what is the point in XRP? And then the penny dropped. Ripple clearly understands this problem, and they have understood this problem. Every single move that Ripple keeps making, and I reflect back on the moves that they have made, it's all been in the pursuit of this one thing.
All right, guys, really quickly, Ripple is the leading blockchain infrastructure on the planet. If they don't have the smartest people working for them, they wouldn't be the largest blockchain infrastructure company on the planet. So, right, they all understand what their goal and view is here. Create an internet of value, have XRP be able to be used in all of the world's financial markets or infrastructures. That is the goal. RLUSD, XRP taking over the world has been from the beginning, will always be.
And as I uncover the regulations and the different annexes of these different documents, I realize they know what they know what they're doing. They really know what they're doing. So I'm trying to communicate that to you because I've been deep in those documents and I'm just going to tell you about them now.
Let's go.
So Ripple clearly understood the problem that XRP was always going to have, trying to integrate itself into this private wholesale banking system. And as a result, they needed a Trojan horse. They needed a way to get into that system so that XRP can be at the heart of all of it.
RLUSD?
So they've basically jammed their foot in the door here with RLUSD, the stablecoin created by Ripple.
Okay.
And if you imagine RLUSD is the Trojan horse and inside is XRP. No one really knows XRP is in there. That's just all about the
Okay, really quickly, RLUSD runs on the XRP ledger and on Ethereum. 90% of the USD is on Ethereum because that is where a lot of the liquidity already is. And so as we develop G Treasury and Ripple Prime used to be Hidden Road, we're hoping that the settlement happens with RLUSD on the XRP side. Any RLUSD transaction on the XRP side, you still need XRP as the gas token because XRP is the gas token of the XRP ledger.
The horse at this point. It's all about RLUSD. Because if Ripple wants to participate in this wholesale payments world, in the wholesale financial system, they must have an asset. They must contribute an asset that meets all of the regulations and is compliant with everything that the wholesale financial system need in an asset. Like if it's compliant with all of that, and of course we have signs that RLUSD is compliant because it's already been accepted in Dubai. And these are just proving grounds so that Ripple can take RLUSD to the wider financial system and say, hey, look, we're already accepted in Dubai, so let's just get this moving.
Okay, really quickly, RLUSD, Japan, Africa, Dubai, Europe, it is expanding everywhere at this point. So I would imagine you're gonna have different versions of RLUSD. You're gonna have like RL Great British Pounds, RL Euro, RL Yen, whatever the currency is in your country. I would imagine over the next few years, you're going to have some type of solution either from Ripple directly or their partners for these types of stablecoins.
So if all of the banks are using their own tokens to actually settle these transactions, that's JP Morgan's deposit tokens, or the stable coins that are going to come out of Japan or the UK with Finality. Ripple's stablecoin, RLUSD, will also be part of that conversation as a compliant asset in that whole world. So you might be thinking, okay, but what about XRP? Like, we've kind of left XRP out the system. You've got the private system and XRP is still there lingering in the public zone. Like, what's going on? Well, here's where it becomes very interesting, because we know that XRP is an asset that you use in between two elements that don't talk to each other. There needs to be an asset in the middle that can allow for that transfer to happen. But there's a really big distinction that happens here. And we've all made this mistake, and I want to try and put my word of caution out there for everyone. We need to really stop talking about XRP as a currency or as a settlement asset. It does us zero favors. Settlement is when you close out a transaction. So you've got euro, there's the asset in between, and then you've got the recipient currency that they wanted. Once that final currency has been received, that is the settlement process. That's the moment of settlement. You'll notice, if you look at that in 3 different sections, XRP isn't at the end. So why do we call XRP the settlement token?
Because it helps with settlement, right? It is the middle layer. It is that bridge between the two currencies. That's why people say settlement. You're like mixing words here to fit your narrative or points, which I guess, but like you're stretching with me.
Actually doesn't make any sense. And so what that tells me is that XRP needs to be defined as something else. The way that I think we should define XRP is not as currency. We're going to get into why in a second. Not as a currency, not as a settlement asset, as a conversion asset. There is actually a specific technical word that we need to use to describe XRP, but we're going to get into that in a second. Because RLUSD doesn't talk to JP Morgan's coin. USDT doesn't talk to RLUSD. These are closed environments, and they are closed environments where the actual deposit token doesn't work. Like the wholesale deposit token doesn't work there for settlement. And there needs to be a conversion moment. So there needs to be a technology in the middle that does that conversion. We're not looking for an asset that settles. We're not looking for a currency that's going to run the whole world. We need a conversion asset. And by nature, just being a conversion asset makes XRP part of the infrastructure. Because as soon as you start viewing XRP as currency or a settlement asset, it starts to be brought under new regulations. There are new requirements for this. There's now a huge regulatory debate on what XRP is and how actually it can't be part of that wholesale system. It can't be part of the private system. It has to exist outside in the public space. We do not want that to happen. We want XRP to be from the public space, participating in the private space. And there are key regulations and key parts of these documents that we're going to uncover in this video. Because ultimately, if we're 5 minutes in, I'm still waiting for the documents. Where are they? Please give me the documents. XRP is infrastructure. It's treated as a tool, and banks don't care about the tools you're using. They only care if it works. What actually has to happen next for XRP as infrastructure, if we're talking about it as infrastructure, to be regulator blessed. Like if it's to become a critical service provider, what has to happen? And well, there are 3 requirements. If the XRP and XRP can meet these requirements, it can then be considered as a critical service provider and basically run the entire system. Number 1 is policy validation.
Validation.
What I mean by that is, you've got Project Guardian. You might have heard of that from Singapore. You've also got the UK's digital security sandbox. These are testing environments, basically experiments by these big entities. And I specifically mentioned the ones that are most important. And it basically shows public chain inflow into the private chains. And it's testing the capabilities of doing that. And so what happens after these live pilots is that you'll get the likes of Project Guardian from the Monetary Authority of Singapore. They will release a document, and that document is called a legal finality opinion. And they also give a supervisory oversight statement. These 2 documents and what is inside of those saying, this was a success for these reasons are incredibly important, because you take those documents and you can take them over to the private banking section and say, hey, we're making a claim here that our company has a software underneath that's going to be a critical service provider. We think we can provide this critical service to the wholesale banking system. Look, we have the legal finality opinion and we have the oversight statement as well from these 2 big sandbox experiments. You would need XRPL and XRP to participate in these sandboxes and these projects. And then we need that opinion piece and the report. But that's the first piece.
That was pretty cool. I haven't heard too many people talking about this, so my hat's off to Lewis for digging all of this up. You do see Ripple working with regulators all over the world. So I would imagine this is probably top of mind, top priority. And they have been slowly kind of getting their hands and the documents and all of these things needed to make all of this happen. So let's go to number 2.
And the second part of this has to do with when I talked about settlement earlier. You need to be able to prove that the asset doesn't operate inside the wholesale system. So we mentioned that XRP is sitting outside of the wholesale system on the public chain, but then meaning that the banks and the wholesale system can essentially say, yeah, we have our own settlement tokens. That's all good. We want to keep only the assets in the wholesale system that we recognize and trust. And if you can prove that XRP actually does sit outside of that system, acknowledging that it doesn't meet the requirements for Principle 9 in that Bank of International Settlements document, then you're good to go and you're kind of cleared to say, okay, as long as you're not trying to get through this Principle 9, then we're fine because we want to control everything in here. And what that means is the XRP layer sits outside of that system and outside of that settlement moment, which the banks are very precious about, and acts only as a conversion mechanism, as a critical service provider. And then third of all, you have something called operational assurance. Like I said earlier about Annex F, in order to meet the criteria for Annex F, you have to have some security here. You have to know that the system can handle the stress. And so in order to prove that the system can handle the stress, there are 3 documents, specific documents that Ripple or the XRP would have to publish and prove in order to be treated as a conversion asset or a critical service provider. And those documents are, I'm going to read them on the screen here, wind down plans, equity buffers, and a detailed incident response procedure. This covers everything about the public chain, essentially telling the private chain, the wholesale system, hey, we might be public chain, but we can actually handle the stress and we do everything in accordance to how you would want it done. It's super secure. We can handle massive inflows. We can handle minimal inflows. And even with the new updates that happened to this document on November the 7th this year, like literally a couple of days ago, we are still compliant and we can still follow the guidance. And if we can meet those standards, you can classify XRP as a critical service provider, silently working underneath everything, allowing the whole system to work. Now, Ripple hasn't published those documents yet. So if there's any time to put a Google search alert on your computer, it's now for those wind down plans, the equity buffers, and the incident response procedure documents published by Ripple or the XRPL. Because if you see these documents actually published and released, anyone else in the world might go, oh, like that's so boring, like not even pay attention to it. But you know now that if these 3 documents get released or these 3 elements get done, we are so close to having the private chain XRP public chain XRP working within the private system and holding the whole thing up. All
right, man, that was a lot. It sounds like I got to set up some Google alerts with, what did he say again? I didn't want to pause the video as he went through it. I'm going to go back and I'm going to like do a little bit of extra research on that. I just wanted to give you kind of like the live reaction as I'm listening to it. I feel like that's sometimes more fun than kind of listening to it 5 times, then kind of picking every detail apart. I think Lewis really does open our eyes about maybe some other areas and avenues that we should be looking at, and things that we need to understand a little bit more. So now I'm going to do my due diligence and spend as much time as I can to figure all of this out. I do want to say thank you to Lewis for spending his valuable time to uncover all of this for the XRP community. This is such an incredible space where you have all of these incredibly bright people coming together, sharing their ideas and views and their knowledge. And man, like it is a great time to be an XRP holder. Oh my God. All right, guys, I'll leave it at that. Thank you for being here. I hope you learned something. Make sure that you're following Crypto Lewis. I think he's starting to make more XRP content. I know a lot of you already love him. And so glad to see him back healthy and doing whatever he wants to do. I'll see you next time. I'm Crypto Sensei. Aloha.